Since I was a child, I learned that my way of thinking was different. It was a difference that bothered others, even though I didn't understand why. The world seemed to insist on ready-made molds, but my mind didn't fit into them. Working at a large tech company was a daily test of these incompatibilities. My name is Ethan Brooks, I am autistic and a programmer, and this is the story of how a pattern in the data changed not only my life but also the way I understood my own value. San Francisco is a city that pulses with innovation. The glass and steel skyscrapers seem to reflect the frantic pace of Innotech, one of the largest tech companies in the United States. Inside, everything was rushed, efficient, and slightly chaotic, a stark contrast to the meticulous organization of my thoughts. When I was hired for the advanced algorithms team, I thought I had finally found a space where my skills would be recognized. It was the kind of work that demanded precision and logic, my strengths. The team was focused on an ambitious project, developing an algorithm capable of predicting pandemic outbreaks based on global health and mobility data. The world was still recovering from the recent pandemic, and there was a palpable urgency in the air. In the first week, I noticed a pattern in the data. Small deviations in the movement of demographic groups seemed to coincide with outbreaks in specific regions. It was as if the numbers were shouting a message that only I could hear. I spent nights refining my analysis until I had something solid enough to present. At the next meeting, I waited for my moment while Dr. Alan Reed, the team leader, spoke with his usual confidence. When I finally had the opportunity to show my charts, I felt my throat dry up. All eyes were on me. I took a deep breath and began. I noticed a pattern in the mobility data, I explained, projecting my graph. These deviations coincide with the onset of outbreaks in several regions. If we optimize the algorithm to identify these anomalies— Interesting, Reed interrupted with a smile as fake as the tone of his voice. But we need more data before deviating from the current plan. I barely finished the sentence before he changed the subject. Maya Carter, our project manager, gave me a look of apology, but it didn't help. It felt like my discovery had been swept under the rug. I left the meeting feeling invisible. I knew I was right, but how could I prove it when no one was willing to listen? The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual, determined to improve my analysis. The corporate environment was quiet at that time, and I took advantage of the calm to organize my thoughts. Innotech had spacious areas with glass walls that let natural light in, but to me, those walls also seemed to highlight the isolation. It wasn't easy to connect with my colleagues, and the previous meeting had only reinforced that. Maya appeared beside me with a coffee in hand. She had a warm and pragmatic demeanor that made her one of the few people I could talk to. "Ethan, I saw your charts yesterday," she said. "They're promising." "Then why did Reed dismiss everything?" I asked, trying to hide my frustration. Maya sighed. "Reed values predictability. He prefers results that he fully understands, even if they're less innovative. But don't give up. Your work has potential." Her words were encouraging, but they didn't erase the reality. Reed wasn't interested in innovation unless it came with an instant validation seal. But giving up wasn't an option for me. In the following days, I refined my analysis even further and found new ways to present the data. I started approaching Maya directly, trying to avoid Reed, and she gave me tips on how to make my ideas more digestible for the committee. Still, there was a constant wait. My interactions with the team were brief and functional. Casual comments and glances that I could barely interpret made me question how I was being perceived. Was I just the weird one on the team? Or someone that, deep down, they knew they needed but would never admit? One afternoon, Reed passed by my desk while I was adjusting my charts. "Working hard, Ethan?" he said, with that condescending tone that made my stomach turn. "Yes," I replied, not lifting my eyes. I knew he wasn't there to listen. He looked at the screen for a few seconds before shrugging. "Just don't waste too much time on theories that lead nowhere." With those words, he left, leaving a burning frustration in me. It wasn't the first time I felt like I had to prove my worth more than anyone else on the team, and I knew it wouldn't be the last. The following week, the team dynamic changed with the arrival of Clara Bennett. She was the new graphic designer hired to help with data visualization, something we hadn't explored deeply before. From the very first moment, Clara stood out. Her colorful hair and laid-back style were a stark contrast to the formal atmosphere of Innotech. But that wasn't all. Clara spoke loudly, laughed often, and seemed to care nothing about office formalities. On the first day, while I was at my desk adjusting a graph, I heard a voice behind me. "You must be Ethan." I looked up, and there she was, holding a tablet and wearing a smile that seemed genuinely curious. "I heard you found something interesting in the data. I want to see." I hesitated. Most people on the team avoided interacting with me unless it was necessary. Clara's direct approach was unsettling. "It's a pattern in the mobility data," I replied, not taking my eyes off the screen. "Then show me," she insisted, pulling up a chair before I could even invite her. Reluctantly, I began explaining what I had discovered. As I spoke, Clara nodded, following every word, but with a gleam in her eye that indicated her mind was always 2 steps ahead. "This is brilliant," she exclaimed when I finished. "But I know exactly why no one listened to you." "Why?" I asked, surprised by her confidence. "Because you're speaking the wrong language for them. They don't understand numbers. They need stories, visuals, something that connects with what they think they know." I didn't know how to respond. She was right, and as I was still processing her words, she continued, "Leave this to me. I'll help you turn these charts into something no one can ignore." For the first time, I felt like I had someone on my side. Clara seemed to see what I saw, but also understood how to translate it for others. She was different, and maybe that was exactly what I needed. In the following days, Clara and I formed an unlikely partnership. While I dove deeper into the data, she transformed my findings into visualizations that looked like they came from a high-level presentation. "Look at this," she said one day, showing me an animated graph that explained my analysis so clearly that even I was impressed. "This is going to leave Reed speechless." She was right. When Maya saw the new presentation, her eyes lit up. "This is incredible, Ethan. Clara, you really brought something new to the team." But it didn't take long for Reed to start noticing the attention our work was receiving. During a team meeting, he casually mentioned, "Visualizations are nice, but we need substance. Let's not waste too much time on decorations." Clara, who wasn't one to back down, immediately responded, "They're not decorations. They're tools to better communicate our ideas." The look Reed gave her was sharp, but Clara wasn't intimidated. I, however, felt my anxiety rise. He was starting to see us as a threat, and that wasn't a good sign. Despite that, we kept moving forward. We were able to conduct a preliminary test of the algorithm, and the results were promising. When we presented our data to Maya, she couldn't hide her excitement. "This could really be a game changer," she said. "But we need something even more solid before we take this to the board." Clara seemed excited by the challenge, but I was more cautious. Reed wasn't the type of person to sit back while others shined. "Do you think he's going to try to sabotage us?" I asked Clara as we reviewed the charts. She smiled. "For sure. But that just means we're on the right track." I wanted to believe her, but I couldn't ignore the feeling that the battle was just beginning. The tension in the office reached a new peak the following week. Clara and I were finalizing our presentation for the board, with Maya guiding us through the final tweaks. For the first time, I felt like our work would be taken seriously. The presentation was scheduled for Thursday morning. I spent the previous night reviewing graphs and data while Clara handled the final visual touches. When I finally finished, I looked at the screen with a sense of quiet pride. This time, I knew it would be impossible to ignore what we had discovered. On the day of the presentation, the meeting room was full. High-level executives and external members of the technical committee were present. Maya wished us good luck as we set up the presentation on the projector. But something unexpected happened before we could begin. Dr. Reed walked into the room with an exaggerated air of confidence and, without warning, took the lead. "Before we begin," he said with that rehearsed smile, "I'd like to share the latest results from the project." He projected familiar charts, our charts. My hands froze. This work was made possible thanks to the collaboration of the entire team, Reed continued. Under my leadership, we were able to identify critical patterns that could transform how we predict pandemic outbreaks. I felt the world around me close in. He was stealing everything Clara and I had done and presenting it as if it were his own. I looked at Clara, who seemed ready to explode. She leaned toward me and whispered, "This won't stand." When the meeting ended, Reed left, surrounded by executives praising his vision. Maya met us in the hallway, her gaze heavy with the knowledge of exactly what had just happened. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I didn't know he'd do this." "Do you think sorry makes it better?" Clara shot back, furious. "He just stole everything. And what can we do?" I asked, feeling defeated. "He has the power. And we have the truth," Clara interrupted. "And I'm going to find a way to prove it." In the following days, Clara became an unstoppable force. Determined to expose Reed, she began digging through emails, meeting records, and previous versions of the reports. "It's all here," she said one day, showing files that proved our charts and data had been developed before Reed even mentioned them. Meanwhile, Maya seemed torn. She knew Reed's ethics were questionable, but she also understood the risks of confronting him. One afternoon, she called me into her office for a conversation. "Ethan," she began, her voice low, "I know Reed manipulated the system to take credit for your work, and I found something that could help you." She handed me a stack of documents. "These are the original reports Reed altered. They prove that not only did he steal your ideas, but he also manipulated the results to make them seem more impressive." My heart raced. "Are you saying he falsified the data?" "Exactly," Maya replied. "But you need to decide if you're ready to take this forward. It's going to put you in a vulnerable position." Before I could respond, Clara entered the office with a smile on her face. "I just spoke to someone from NextMind," she announced. "NextMind?" I asked, confused. "It's a startup that focuses on neurodiversity," she explained. "They value people like you, Ethan, and they're interested in seeing your work." The idea of working in an environment where my way of thinking would be valued seemed tempting, but leaving Innotech would mean giving up everything I had fought for. I looked at Clara and Maya, feeling torn. Leave Innotech or face Reed and risk everything. It was a choice I knew would change my life forever. The decision to confront Reed wasn't easy. The evidence was on our side, but the weight of corporate hierarchy was on his. Still, Clara, Maya, and I knew we couldn't let him get away with it. With Maya's support, we managed to secure an opportunity to present our case directly to the external committee. On the day of the meeting, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The room was large, with an oval table surrounded by executives and investors, all eager to hear about the progress of the project. Reed was as confident as ever, but there was something in his eyes, perhaps a shadow of doubt, that gave me courage. He started as usual, taking control of the narrative. "Our project is on the right track," he announced, projecting the charts he had stolen from Clara and me. "These results reflect months of collaborative work under my direct supervision. It was now or never." "Excuse me," I interrupted, my voice firmer than I expected. "I'd like to add some important information." Reed tried to interrupt. "Ethan, I think we've covered this." "Actually, we haven't," I retorted, looking directly at him. With a click, I projected the original charts on the screen, along with the drafts and dated reports that Clara had organized. These data were developed by me as part of an analysis I began weeks before they were presented in this room. An uncomfortable silence filled the room. Some committee members exchanged looks, while others leaned forward, intrigued. Clara, by my side, projected an animation showing how the patterns we discovered could predict outbreaks with accuracy. Maya then handed over the documents proving that Reed had manipulated reports. "Furthermore," she said, her voice calm but assertive, "there is clear evidence that the results previously presented were deliberately altered." Reed tried to react. "This is a misunderstanding," he said with a tight smile. "Everything was closely supervised by me." "Supervised, but not executed," I retorted. "And not with integrity." Murmurs spread through the room. Reed began to lose his composure, while committee members pressed him with questions. When the meeting ended, it was clear that Reed was finished. He left the room in silence, and I finally felt the weight of the frustration and effort we had accumulated begin to lift. A few days later, we received the news that Reed had been fired. The company initiated an internal investigation, while Clara, Maya, and I were congratulated for our courage in bringing the truth to light. Although the victory was satisfying, something inside me told me that my journey at Innotech had come to an end. The environment still seemed hostile to innovative ideas, and despite the recognition, I felt that I didn't belong there. Clara noticed this before I even said anything. "So, when are we heading to Next Mind?" she asked with a mischievous smile. I laughed for the first time in weeks. "I think it's time," I replied. The transition to Next Mind was liberating. The startup was different from anything I had ever experienced. There, people celebrated unique perspectives. My work was valued for its originality, and I finally felt like I was in an environment that understood the power of neurodiversity. Clara joined me, and together we began working on new projects. Every day was a new opportunity to explore ideas that would have previously been dismissed or misinterpreted. Maya stayed at Innotech but promised to continue fighting to transform the company's culture. "You've inspired me," she said the day we said goodbye. At Next Mind, I found a purpose that went beyond technical work. I understood that my journey wasn't just about algorithms and predictions. It was about showing that being different isn't a limitation. It's a strength. Next Mind was more than just a startup. It was a space where ideas were born, nurtured, and, most importantly, respected. The people here came from different backgrounds and carried their own stories of exclusion, but they all shared one thing: the determination to show the world that diversity is a strength, not a weakness. In the first few months, Clara and I led a project to create an analysis system that would help small health organizations predict local disease outbreaks. The collaborative environment at Next Mind allowed me to explore approaches that would have previously been discarded as non-conventional. Here, ideas were judged by merit, not by how well they fit into established patterns. "You're different," Clara commented one day, as we reviewed our data. "Different how?" I asked. "More confident. More at home," she replied with a smile. She was right. For the first time, I didn't feel out of place. My work made sense not only to me but to the people around me. But for me, that wasn't enough. I started thinking about how I could help others like me. People who had talent but were discarded or underestimated because they didn't fit into traditional molds. That's when the idea came to me. What if we created an institute? I suggested one day while having lunch in a park near the office. Clara raised an eyebrow. "An institute?" "Yeah, a place where neurodivergent young people can learn how to use their skills in environments that value them. Training, mentoring, support, everything I never had." Clara smiled, that smile that always meant she was about to dive headfirst into something. "That's brilliant, Ethan. Let's make it happen." From that moment on, I started planning. Using what I had learned at Innotech and Next Mind, I sketched out a program that combined technical training with personal development. The idea was simple: to create a space where difference was celebrated from the start. As we worked on the institute, Next Mind continued to thrive. Our team grew and more neurodivergent people joined us. It was inspiring to see how each new mind brought something unique, something only they could offer. Looking back, I realized that every obstacle I faced prepared me for this moment. Reed's betrayal, Clara and Maya's support, and even the doubts I faced along the way shaped me. They taught me that the value of an idea doesn't depend on who understands it immediately, but on who has the courage to defend it. Today, as I look to the future, I know that my journey is just beginning. The Institute is taking shape, and our first group of neurodivergent young people is about to begin the program. It's exciting to think that perhaps they won't have to fight the same battles I fought. Maybe they can start where I left off and reach heights I can only imagine. Because neurodiversity isn't just a competitive advantage. It's a revolution, and I'm ready to be part of it.